Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to this last minute live stream. This past week I was in holiday in Busan, so I missed our last Sunday reading, but I'm here with you right now. This will be my first live stream in this series that I've not prepared for. My my voice sounds very different, sounds very weak. Don't know why. Hope I get some bass back. The kindergartners are going to need to be put in their place tomorrow. Bring it up, bring it back, Captain. Okay. So this is our 44th live stream, starting at chapter 6, verse 20, and we're just going to go until we don't go before. So I'm just going to do this live stream kind of the way I'd prepare for a live stream, where I'll just read the verse and skim the purport, maybe skim the Sanskrit too. I'm just organic, guys. I do everything different every time as much as possible, because that's just natural and organic. And I like to be gluten-free, lactose tolerant every day. The one ritual we have here now, for now, which we'll eventually expand upon, is 2 invocation mantras to invoke Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is. Feel free to join me if you like. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. All right. Actually, in this edition of the Gita, it's verses 20 through 23 are all lumped together. So let's do that now. Here they are. The stage of perfection. Oh, I know why my voice is weak. It's because I'm trying to speak over the loud fan. One sec. At least maybe now it won't sound as weak to me. All right, 20 through 23. The stage of perfection is called trance or samadhi, when one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. That was verses 20 through 23, and pretty long purport to go with it. Quick little grammar note. I'll give you an example of a bona fide book edit that Srila Prabhupada would definitely have approved of, because as you'll see, it doesn't change anything in the meaning whatsoever. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is, well, A, I'm an English teacher, and B, it's just the nature of English where you have these stupid articles, a and the. A lot of languages just don't have them. Like Sanskrit, there's no the. I'm pretty sure there's no the. maybe there's probably counters. Every language has, a way to count objects. But these fancy little articles, that's a very English thing, which Prabhupada and his editors, or whoever it was, I don't know who exactly it was. It was either just Prabhupada or Prabhupada plus his editors, whoever put this 72 Macmillan edition together, missed this one in the second to last sentence. One is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. It should be the greatest difficulty. That's it. Just put in the, because greatest is a singular noun. So the superlative form is always the, right? The most, the greatest, the least, the happiest, and so on. So he missed a the there, or the editors, whatever, and it doesn't matter. That's why I'm very happy to bring up our first ever Vidyananda, bona fide book edit here. It changes nothing. If you put in the or you don't put in the, it's still the same Bhagavad Gita, actually. I'm not shaken at all. Speaking of the verse, one is never shaken. I'm not shaken at all that there's no the there. I wouldn't, like, if that could be one reason why it wasn't caught, because maybe an editor caught it and it was like, oh, should I bring it up to Prabhupada's attention? It's such a small thing, it doesn't even matter. That could be me if I was there back in the day when, anyway, here's what I'm drinking today. Welch's grape soda. Very popular here in Korea in some places. It's running out soon, though. I don't have another drink, I don't think. Okay. There was one more thing I wanted to talk. Oh, so how can you write? There it is. 20, 21. Oh, we're actually missing one. So I was going to say, how do you know which verses are which? Well, in the Sanskrit, in the transliterated Sanskrit, you can see it's chunked. There's 3 chunks, but there's actually 4 verses, 20, 21, 22, 23. There's actually 4 verses. And normally every single verse in the Bhagavad Gita has the same standard meter and rhythm. It's exactly 4 lines, and they go together in a particular way every single time. Looking back, it's every single verse is like this. So you can clearly see there's 20 from Yatro Paramate up to Tushyati, and then the next verse, Sukham to Tatvataha, but then there's that third chunk, which is actually 6 lines. It should be 8 to make an even exactly 4 verses of 4 lines each. We should see 16 lines, but there's 8 and there's 2 less than 16. What is that? 14. Sorry, I'm looking at myself in the camera. I got to practice looking at the camera, not looking at myself in the screen. Whatever. Anyway, I think we're about ready to get into it here. Maybe there was one thing that just jumped out to me as I was reading the verse. Oh, transcendental senses. That's an interesting point, is that someone who has reached the samadhi state, or someone who has not and is reading about it here, you have to understand that this is not physical. It's not material. So it's not like just an increase in degree. Like if you have a very blissed out state where, I don't know, you're just like, for me, it might be daydreaming, doing some philosophy, and you're maybe listening to some Beethoven and you just get really blissed out. Samadhi is not, just like that, times a million. It's not just an increase in degree. of some material state of consciousness, which is comprised of the five senses and the mind. It's not that. It's transcendental senses that are sensing and tasting this experience. Transcendental how? Well, we're not talking about the five material senses. We're not talking about the mind, which the mind, to review, should be review for everyone here. The mind is the thing. I was thinking about this earlier in the train. It's like the data bank and processor of the five senses. So the five senses are, your inputs. And then the mind is the processor and output machine. The output of the mind goes back into the senses, and it also goes to the intelligence. And then the intelligence can choose, what to do with it. But the intelligence is also a material sense, as is the ego. So transcendental senses obviously does not refer to the senses, the five senses, the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. It's not referring to any of those. It's referring to the direct senses of the soul, or maybe just the soul itself, which has senses or doesn't have senses. It doesn't matter for this point. It doesn't really matter. But the soul itself is just having this experience, and the soul itself is perceiving itself with this experience. So it's like pure bliss stacked on pure bliss. And it seems to me now, thinking about it, that the material senses are not actually capable of tasting this stuff. When they try to taste it, they'll just maybe short out, kind of like when you plug in too much electricity into something, it kind of just shortcuts, what's it called? Short circuits the system. Yeah, transcendental senses. So I think I'm going to just summarize the purport as I'm reading it. We practice yoga, and then we're gradually detached from material concepts. And then after enough of that yoga, one becomes situated in trance, samadhi. Now, Prabhupada says, what is samadhi? Realizing the supersoul through transcendental mind and intelligence without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the superself. Oh, so perfect. Oh, wow. It's a technically accurate and very concise practical analysis of what samadhi is. You cannot beat that definition anywhere else, guys. Not even Bashar. Bashar fans out there, say whoop, whoop. Now, we're getting right in that sentence, we're also getting a better also definition or glance at what is transcendental senses. In the verse, what was that referring to? Well, Prabhupada says transcendental mind and intelligence. So that could mean that just as the material self, the false ego, the person, the human-bodied soul has a mind and intelligence, which is temporary and material, the soul has its own mind and intelligence, has a spiritual mind and spiritual intelligence. That is one possibility that could be referred to here. It also might mean that it is that same material mind and intelligence that is just perfectly cleansed. So it just doesn't be affected by the material objects. That doesn't seem as plausible to me as the first answer. Because we do read in other places that the soul has a spiritual body. It's not just, pure light and, there's no form to it at all. We all have, the spirit soul is an individual spark. Individual means unique. So let's think this through. Like, even if the soul is just pure light, that same shade of light cannot be the same shade for every pure soul. If whatever that form of light is, if it's exactly the same form for every other soul, then they're not individual souls. How can a soul be individual if its form is exactly the same as every other form of every other soul? So something has to be, you have to distinguish soul by soul. And what's coming to mind is Tesla's quote about frequency, vibration, resonance, these sorts of terms. So, some souls could be at a different frequency, different shade of pure light, you might say. Or in this personal universe and personal faith that we're given here from Srila Prabhupada and the great acharyas before him, it would seem that, just as they've said before, that this material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. It would seem that the spiritual self has its own everything. Just like Krishna has, he has a 4-armed form, a 2-armed form, and so on, but he has a human form with eyes, ears, legs, a billion heads, a billion legs. Doesn't matter. It's a human form. So that spiritual body that's in a human form will also have a human mind, like he speaks. He doesn't have a human form and then he doesn't use his tongue and doesn't speak. No, like he speaks. And he has a mind and intelligence and ego, whatever, and all that stuff. Personality, he likes cows. We know he likes cows. We know he likes and loves and respects all creatures, but we know he really likes cows. So that's personality, right? And it seems we all, each spiritual soul, myself and yourself, everyone listening to this, we have our own spiritual body with our own little personalities. In Vaikuntha, maybe I'm a peacock guy. I love the peacocks. I don't know. In this realm, I seem to be really into pandas and China. I don't know why. Maybe there's a China in Vaikuntha. I don't know. It's mildly interesting to speculate about, but it's important to remember that sort of speculation does not matter. It's just a funny joke. Should never be more than that. Okay, continuing on with the purport. Yoga practice is more or less from the Patanjali system. And then he talks more about what is conflating the individual soul with the super soul. Monists do this, impersonalists, voidists, and so on. That's one of the main reasons Srila Prabhupada came and wrote all these books and did everything he did, was to especially in this Kali Yuga, to give the people a definitive, explicit expression of the correct personal theology of Godhead, which means God is a person, first of all. So where's Islam in all of this? That's quite a question. We'll have to get to that later. Quick note on that. I mean, look at India. Look at what the Muslims did and have been doing in India. That's very significant. It's just significant. What will happen, what did happen, it's interesting, but it's why there's so much violence, because you have a very personal, Hindu, not just the, like, Hinduism in general is the most personal major world religion by far. It's not even close. 33 million deities, gods, or whatever. They're all persons. One's an elephant. It's so personal. It's super, super extremist personal. Then from the theological perspective, our Gaudiya tradition is the most personal. Okay? So we're dealing with very, very, very personal religion. Trying to live in the same town sometimes as Muslims, who are the most impersonal major world religion by far. They are the other extreme. Please get this through your heads. We Gaudiyas are extremists. The Muslims are also extremists. Please understand this. It's very simple. It's very true. And because of that, you don't have to get personal about it. It's just how it is. Now, it just so happens that both are right. Brahmajyoti, the impersonal effulgence of the Lord, is God. God is impersonal. And he's personal. He's also a person. Both are true at the same time. That's why in the theological world, like, we win. Because yes, we have this extremist personal bhav, whatever, but also we have achintya beda abeda tattva, which clearly links everything together so that you can live peacefully with people who are in Brahmajyoti realization. You could say, well, that's really cool, man. Yeah, that's God. But keep going. That's it. And once you zoom out and you see this whole picture, as I do, you'll see that it's not about higher and lower. It's about more and more personal. And then the more, the closer you as we all agree we are people, right? Maybe our essence is impersonal, but this body at least is personal. But whatever we are, the more we get closer to the personal God, and the more intimate we are, person to person, just the closer we are to God. That's it. And who is the greater soul? One who is closer to God or farther away from God? Guys, it's really that simple. The more you try to look at it fancy pants and lollipops way, you might miss the forest through the trees. You might lose the thread. You have to be mindful of the great thread, the sutra. All right. We're at 24 minutes. Looks like we're probably not going to get to the next chunk of verses. We'll see. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist. But in this verse, transcendental pleasure realized through transcendental senses is accepted. Prabhupada, it's being really nice here. Is accepted. Well, hopefully it's accepted by us, and probably by everyone reading this. I mean, I know it's accepted by Prabhupada, but it's not just accepted, it's given explicitly by Sri Krishna, Sri Bhagavan, in this verse. And this is also corroborated by Patanjali Muni. The great sages declare in his Yoga Sutras, this is true. Okay, and then he talks about how, we have an impure mirror of the mind and we're doing a clearance. We're clearing the impurities off the mirror. And then the living entity becomes aware of its constitutional position, and that's when the bliss comes, and this is also liberation. And the theory of nirvana also corresponds with this principle, but Prabhupada says it's preliminary, which goes back to what I just said earlier. It's if you get to the impersonal nirvana, whatever aspect of Godhead, that's great. But that's preliminary. It doesn't end there. After nirvana, or material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities, or devotional service of the Lord, or Krishna consciousness. And then Prabhupada just mentions two words from the Bhagavatam, which says, Svarupena Vyavastitihi. This is the, quote, real life of the living entity. Maya, or illusion, is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. And liberation does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. It means, once again, clearing out the impurities to reveal what's underneath, which is eternal, which is already pure. That thing which is actually pure does not to be purified because it's already pure. All the things that are impure must get purified to see or taste or link with that which is pure and eternal. If it's not pure, how can it be eternal? There may be a counter argument there, but I'm not easily coming up with it. Don't think too much. And as described in this chapter, Prabhupada doesn't say already described or described later. There are two kinds of samadhi. Sampragyata and asampragyata. By philosophy, or asampragyata is when there's no longer any connection with mundane pleasure and transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses, and thus being unshaken from it. So you can use philosophy to, get a quick taste of samadhi, but to stay there, philosophy is not enough. Philosophy will not take you there, which seems to be true. Now I'm going to read this word for word because I love when Prabhupada talks about what's happening in the modern world, because he's so perfect at putting these lower degraded practices and people in their place gracefully, dominantly, but also gracefully and with compassion. He's the master at this. He's very, 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 very good at this. Quote, today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, perfections, in the process of yoga are not perfectly situated. If the yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection, as is stated in this verse. Persons, therefore, indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. It's pretty good. It's a little redundant for me, but as far as, a gentle destruction of contemporary ding-dongs, that's pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good. And then we got to take care of the body. But the Krishna conscious person accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. And he is callous toward incidental occurrences. Callous, interesting word. Accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. He endures all these because he knows they come and go and do not affect his duties. Once again, back to like chapter 2, the basics of yoga. Weather, hot and cold, happiness and distress, pleasure and pain, it all comes and goes, baby. The sun rises, the sun sets. Every day it comes and goes. What is in the middle? What is staying true, staying the same all the time? That's what the yogi focuses on, because that's real. And if you do it right, you actually honor the sun. You honor the family. You honor everyone. But at the same time, that stuff isn't real. The jivas that are my family, they're real. The jivas are real. But my relationship with them is not real. It's temporary. Even if we've done this many lifetimes, my mother, in this lifetime, she's my mother. In another lifetime, he's my son, whatever. However many times you've been really close to these jivas, that relationship, that material relationship, father, son, mother, sister, daughter, whatever, it's not real. It's not theologically, ontologically real. It feels real, sure, and it's something to be responsible about, but it's not actually real. Only the soul is real, God is real. There's very few things that are actually real. Real meaning eternal. If it can die, if it can just wither and zip, is it real? Maybe it's just an illusion. If something is temporary, well, it is real. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but from the perspective of eternity, for someone who's in eternity consciousness, like Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, one aspect of this is you have eternity consciousness. You're living in eternal time, which many people say is actually just the here and now. Eternity is actually just now. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. It's kind of new agey. Don't have really Shastic reference for you there, but getting too far out into the deep end. All right, well, that's it. Up to 23. We could do one more verse, but I don't think we need to. 35 minutes. I'm always trying to that looks like a nice verse to leave for next time. So that's it, folks. Next time will be live stream 45, starting at chapter 6, verse 24. Thanks for playing. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Shri Krishna. Jai Shri Vaishnava, Vaishnavi. See you next time.